Okay, thank you, everybody. This is Patrick Wright, the interim director of the Forest Management Task Force. Glad you could all join us today for this meeting. Just to cover some logistical issues, all of you will be on mute just to make sure we don't get any interference. But for our speakers, you will be unmuted when you're ready to go. The way that we're going to proceed today is I'm going to start with some welcoming and opening remarks. Then, as is customary, trying to see if that's me. Hopefully you can hear all this. I will start with some opening remarks, and we'll turn it over to, as we always do, to our co-chairs, Wade Crawford, Tom Porter, and Lauren Sanchez, and also our special guest, Randy Moore. I will then give a short overview of the plan as a whole, and Jessica Morse, who did extraordinary heavy lifting in pulling together our $1 billion state budget, will give an overview of that. And to the extent that we have time, we'll take questions. Although, as we've found in our previous meetings, it's really challenging in this format to get into Q&A, particularly since we can't see you face to face. So I'm in the process of trying to arrange meetings of our regional work groups so that we can get into the recommendations at a more specific level. So hopefully that covers all the logistics for today. Just by way of opening remarks, I obviously want to thank all of you who have been actively involved in what's been a 2-year-long effort. As many of you know, I joined the effort about 6 months ago and was given 3 very specific directives from Secretary Crawford and others in the administration. To be action-oriented, to be comprehensive, and to be collaborative. Given that we've just had one of the worst seasons in history from a fire perspective and 2 years of effort, it's really time to focus on specific outcomes, specific leads. So I hope you'll find the plan meets that test with nearly 100 specific deliverables with clear agencies who are accountable. On the issue of comprehensiveness, most of you know when this started, it was really focused on forest health. But I think we've all come to realize in the last couple of years that the resilience of our forests and the resilience of our communities are linked. So we're not going to have a successful plan unless we address both of those issues head on, and that we link them in turn to the state's climate, biodiversity, and economic development goals as well. So we hope you'll find that the plan provides a vehicle for linking all of those efforts. And finally, on the collaborative effort, given the multiple ownerships in California, the multiple stakeholders at the federal, state, local level, state issues plan wouldn't have any meaning unless it had buy-in from a broad range of agencies and stakeholders. So again, we've worked really hard to build this from the bottom and come up with a plan that has broad-based support. So having said that, it's certainly customary and appropriate this time to thank all the people that have been involved in this effort. There are unfortunately too many to mention in this large of a group, but I do want to single out 2 people in particular who did a lot of heavy lifting. One is Tom Porter and the CAL FIRE staff. As many of you know, this was an extraordinary year. Several of the biggest fires in recorded history were burning at the same time. CAL FIRE had to deal with that. At the same time, trying to build the building blocks for a $1 billion budget and all the details and scrutiny that comes with that. They also at the same time had to deal with dozens of task force recommendations that affected every aspect of their program. They did all that and also had to deal with COVID-19, which prevented us from having a single meeting together. So, Tom, I can't say enough about what you and your staff have done. Obviously, first and foremost is the heroism of your folks in the field, but I just want to applaud your commitment to make this process work as well. It's just been a great partnership that we've had from the beginning. And then secondly, I want to thank Randy Moore. Randy saw without hesitation the opportunity that this plan presented to cement the growing partnership between the state and the feds. So very much looking forward to his remark and building a strong future together. And of course, for all of you who participated in this plan, I want to thank you for your tireless efforts in shaping every aspect of the plan, from recommendations to ideas to specific chapters, as many of you wrote. It truly is a product of a collective effort on behalf of many, many folks throughout the state. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Secretary Crawford, to kick us off.
Okay, big thanks, Patrick, both for that good introduction and all the work you did in recent weeks to bring together this action plan. I know I speak for Governor Newsom when I say how excited I am for this moment in time on this topic. I wanted to step back and take stock a little bit of what we experienced since I was last with the task force. That was, of course, before the global pandemic that we continue to be challenged with. And I should say, I hope this webinar finds everybody healthy and safe. Never more important than now to do all we need to protect ourselves and our families and communities from the pandemic. But also, you know, before the worst wildfire season in California's history. The stat that Patrick alluded to is one I repeat often. 5 of the 6 largest wildfires in our state's 170-year history were burning at the same time last summer. And we experienced, you know, what I consider to be the country, if not the world's largest, most sophisticated fighting force between CAL FIRE and U.S. Forest Service, frankly, totally overwhelmed by the scale and severity of fires that were happening at one point. Tom and Randy and I and others found ourselves in the surreal circumstance just weeks later of briefing the president directly, who came to California because the wildfires had reached that level of severity. And in the wake of the fire season, obviously we have a whole lot of damage to respond to and quickly restore, even as we prepare for the next wildfire season amidst a very dry winter. So I think we all agree that the challenge has never been more complex and frankly, a higher acuity. And we also agree that we cannot respond our way out of this crisis. Despite the heroism of the men and women that work for both our state and federal and local firefighting forces, we need to do so much more. And you all know that because you've been at it for the last 2 years on this task force, really identifying what needs to get done. So I think I would say thank you for the countless hours you've actually spent getting us to this point. Getting us to the point where we have our arms around one comprehensive action plan that integrates all of these other strategies, whether it's the forest carbon plan or the shared stewardship agreement between the U.S. Forest Service and the state, or so many other local, regional, state, federal plans. Our goal with this action plan is to really have in one place everything that we need to do. And of course, at the state level, it wouldn't mean a whole lot if we weren't actually investing at the scale that we needed to. And that's really where Jessica and so many of you have come in, really making a successful case to the governor and the Department of Finance this year to take what I call a quantum leap of investment in wildfire and forest resilience, moving to fully $1 billion that if the legislature approves, we're going to actually be able to move forward in coming years. To me, the investment and the action plan represent somewhat of a paradigm shift. And you'll get into that more as you hear about the action plan that you helped produce. But a couple points that I'm excited about. One is the recognition that we really need to take a regionalized approach across California. Wildfire and forest resilience look very different in the north coast of California than they do in greater Los Angeles. And we know that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work, and that we have to advance projects regionally in full partnership with local and regional leaders and groups, be they RCDs or fire safe councils or counties. And so this regional approach, I think, is a part of the paradigm shift. Also, as Patrick mentioned, this notion of it's not the question of forest management or home hardening, whether you do prescribed fire or infrastructure hardening. We have to do both. We have to ensure healthy landscapes, be they forest, woodland, chaparral. We have to build protective, appropriate fire breaks around communities. And then we obviously have to partner with the locals and and empower them to build the planning and preparation they need to in each of the communities. So I think this action plan is a really, really strong foundation. As we said to the legislative leaders that we briefed on this last week, who are really leading in so many ways and frankly driving a lot of what's in the action plan, we told them we don't think this is the grand solution. There are still gaps that we need to fill. I view this almost as a living plan that gets modified over time as both threats and opportunities change. But we think it's a heck of a foundation. And we think if we can make the case with our legislative colleagues for this $1 billion of funding, we'll be moving down the road towards implementing this action plan, towards meeting the commitments in the shared stewardship agreement, and most importantly, toward protecting people and nature from worsening catastrophic wildfires. So for all those reasons, I'm really glad that we're at this point, and I want to thank you. I guess last point, and that is execution. None of this action plan amounts to much if we don't actually get the work done. So I'm looking forward to understanding how we really shape the task force moving forward to really be a focused platform for implementation, where we bring together the key agencies and leaders that are accountable for driving this progress and work together to actually make progress and measure that progress. I think we need to maintain a collaborative, inclusive approach, but at the same time, be really focused in holding ourselves accountable to achieve what's called for in the action plan. So I'm excited. I've got sleeves rolled up, quite literally. I want to get sleeves rolled up figuratively and work with Randy and Tom and Patrick and Jessica and so many others in coming months to actually make this a reality. And last point, the governor's proposed budget is truly just a proposal. And so we'll be working with the legislature in coming weeks and months to make the case for those investments. And again, I think if we get those investments, the wind is in our sails to make a lot of great progress. So thanks so much, Patrick.
Thank you, Wade. Randy, I think you're up next.
Okay, great. Thank you, Patrick. Secretary Crawford, I really appreciate your words, and it just underscores, I think, relationships we have here in California and how committed we are of working across jurisdictional boundaries for the good of the land and for the good of the people. So I really thank you, Chief Porter, Director Wright, task force members, and Jessica, of course, you. It's been a pleasure having you all at the helm there at the state. And I'm just positive about the direction that we're going in and the energy and the commitment that we have made toward achieving those goals that are identified in the action plan. You know, as Secretary Crawford had just said, you know, we've just witnessed the largest single fire season and the largest decade, really, of wildland fire in California's history. You know, we faced unprecedented drought and tree mortality. Because we're collaborating, though, to face these challenges, we made a lot of great progress, but there's still much work that remains to be done. To make our forests and communities resilient, it'll require the continued combined efforts of all stakeholders, public and private, rural and urban, government and non-government, as well as academics. It will take the traditional knowledge of our tribes. It will take the passion of environmental leaders. It will take the savvy and determination of our family-owned timber companies, both large and small. And everyone in the state of California benefits from healthy forests, clean water, clean air, fish, wildlife, solitude. You know, the pandemic did a lot of things, and it demonstrated a lot of stuff over the past year. And one of the things that it really demonstrated is that outdoor recreation is really important. We've had record visitation, and that's likely to increase. Our rural economies benefit from that visitation. Rural economies would also benefit from additional infrastructure, such as community-scale bioenergy. Resilient forests will require an investment of money and resources for sure. And an example is those announced by Governor Newsom in his proposed budget. I really applaud his leadership on fire and forestry, on the environment, and on climate change. The Pacific Southwest region, this region, is also committing our resources to implement the action plan and the items that were identified in it. Our first focus is always safety of our employees, contractors, and the public. We'll support the national response to COVID-19 and any federal economic stimulus, such as investments in recreation infrastructure from the Great American Outdoors Act. The task force and all its members did some really great work the past 2 years, and the action plan is thoughtful, it's comprehensive, and it really exemplifies how all of us are working together in the spirit of shared stewardship. Our initial focus on fire restoration opportunities has been taking place during this first quarter of our fiscal year, and we'll look to continue that going throughout the rest of this year and even next year, because you know that as much progress that we're making, this is an ongoing challenge and issue for us. And so we look forward to working with all of you to create resilient forests and vibrant communities. And there are 10, I don't know how familiar you all are with the items identified in the task force, but I believe there's 10 action items in there. And we are beginning to align our region around accomplishing the goals and the things that are identified in the task force. What you may or may not notice is that we've already began breaking the region up into 4 different regional sections across the state, sharing resources, but as well as working with those different communities on the shared stewardship philosophy to bring everyone to the table. So I'm looking forward to this year. I know that we have some challenges with COVID, but I've also am positive because we've demonstrated that we're able to find ways to work with COVID, and I expect that to continue. So Patrick, I'll turn that back over to you. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this.
All right, Randy, thank you very much. Tom Porter, welcome.
Thank you, and thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot and Regional Forester Moore. Powerful words. And I've been reflecting, really going through the report as we were finalizing, and then over the last couple of weeks as we've been working through budget related items and kind of dovetailing all of this together. And I know I wear the uniform, I represent CAL FIRE, I show up in front of the media as the fire chief, but truly CAL FIRE is not CAL FIRE without the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. And we are all of that and more. And this has been a beautiful development of this plan and this effort that dovetails something that Randy and his organization and Department of Forestry and Fire Protection have been trying to do for decades. And starting in Southern California, working together under the tree mortality that occurred in the early 2000s, right around the turn of the century, we knew the model that worked, and it's been expanding and expanding further. And then we had the tragic tree mortality in the Southern Sierra that really bound us in a way, unfortunately, but fortunately, that we needed to be, and bound us all together, all interests, all working toward a common, better, healthy ecosystem across the state. And while we say forest and we use forest, we say it often. Secretary Crowfoot and I were talking just recently about, well, what are we really talking about? And we're talking about wildlands. These are the native wildlands of California. They're all in. We are all in to protect all of them. And so I guess what I'm saying is this is a long time in coming. And at times I felt like kind of the fortunate one, but also the unfortunate one, in that the budget has been loaded on CAL FIRE's back to do all this stuff, and we're turning a corner. We're sharing the workload, we're sharing the burden, we're sharing the planning, and it's an awesome time. And as the state forester, I think, which is another title that I carry, and I'm part of the National Association of State Foresters. Every state has one, and every province, and we get together regularly, and we will later this week. And often they're asking about how things are going with our shared stewardship, how things are with Region 5. They know how well we're working together. And this is just another set of feathers in this cap of where California really fits as a leader in natural resource and wildland health management across the nation and throughout the world. So I look forward to this plan and working through the actions that are in the plan. It is a comprehensive plan, and I know also that it is a living plan, and we will be adjusting it as we move forward and making sure that it works for all wildlands of California. Thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Lauren Sanchez, do we have you on from Cal EPA?
You do. Patrick, I'm sorry I'm not on video, but I can assure you and Wade, my sleeves are also rolled up. I want to start by thanking the four of you gentlemen, Patrick, you and Secretary Crowfoot in particular, for your leadership in putting together these 100 action-based, science-based recommendations that really are going to benefit all of Californians. Would not have been possible without the four of you. I luckily am involved in a number of kind of collaborative air and climate and water processes, and have to just step back and say this is one of the most collaborative and comprehensive efforts. I was fortunate enough to be a part of 2 years of all levels of government, our tribal partners, stakeholders around the state. Thank you to everyone who participated, who shared their expertise and perspectives, and really strengthened this plan. I'm always mindful that this is mostly a resources show, but selfishly, I'm excited because, we can't attain our air and water and climate goals without this type of partnership and without strategic investments in our forest management. So I'm really, really grateful, to be with you all today. I want to kind of reflect on two quick things that were shared on Friday when the governor rolled out the budget and this exciting announcement. One, that Secretary Crowfoot highlighted, that every dollar invested in prevention and mitigation is, Secretary Crowfoot, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 6 that the state will benefit, and over $2 billion of Cal EPA's budget last year was fire cleanup, and so thrilled to be supporting the governor's proposal for the $1 billion on the front end. Hopefully a lot less devastation across California from wildfires moving forward. And then secondly, my boss highlighted that morning, those of us that live in the Bay Area woke up to the orange apocalyptic skies last September. And moving into 2021, I am feeling incredibly hopeful, that future generations may wake up to fewer mornings like that, and that this partnership and this plan we put together played a quantum leaping, galvanizing force in moving us in that direction. So thank you again to all of you, and excited to get to work.
And Patrick, I just wanted to thank Lauren and Jared, of course, Secretary Blumenfeld. One thing they lift up in all this is the public health impacts. And, Chief Porter told me, at the end of the summer, he said, we all have California's forests in our lungs right now. And we know as we contend with really challenging air quality in parts of the state where vulnerable communities are having real health outcomes as a result, this catastrophic fire that's creating a smoke season, almost like a 5th season in California, is untenable. And so, Jared and Lauren's engagement has made sure that we keep that top of mind. And as you'll talk about, some of the science that we're investing is going to be helping us understand more of the impacts of that smoke inhalation. So just a big thanks to the partners at Cal EPA.
Okay, thank you all. That was a terrific opening. We're going to turn now to an overview of the plan itself. We're not going to run through all nearly 100 actions. For those of you who don't have the plan, it's pretty easy to find. You just go on the Forest Management Task Force website. You can find it there, and certainly the budget on the Department of Finance's website. What I hope to do just in the next few minutes, I'm going to run through the same presentation that roughly that Secretary Crawford gave to the legislature last week. It's really important to hear just sort of the themes and the highlights more than I think in some cases the specific action, so that, as Wade said, this is a living document. We really want to make sure these themes move forward together. And then I think what we'll do, I'll get to this at the end of the presentation, we'll be scheduling regional work group meetings so that we can dive into the actions in more detail with folks who have questions, issues, or concerns. So with that, Curtis, let's take it away. Next slide. Just again, a couple of the major themes that you've already heard about. One is we do intend this to be a comprehensive framework that covers both the forest health side and the community side. It's built on directives, both actually three ways. It has recent legislation and executive orders, but also a range of federal mandates, which should have been added as well. It's really to try to provide a one-stop shop document that pulls all that together. As we've talked about, real focus here on deliverables. We don't want a plan that sits on a shelf. So we have a very strong set of specific deliverables and key actions. It does, as several of our speakers have talked about, builds on the shared stewardship agreement with the Forest Service, as well as growing partnerships with our local and regional partners as well. And then finally, as we've emphasized, it'll continue to be developed and implemented through a collaborative process as we move ahead. Again, for those of you who are relatively new to us, this was launched in 2018 on the heels of the Forest Carbon Plan. It originally grew out of, in addition to that, the Tree Mortality Task Force, largely chaired by the state agencies, but a very strong partnership with our federal colleagues, with RCDs, fire safe councils, and a broad range of stakeholders throughout the state. At some point, we were up to 24 different working groups, almost all of which were co-chaired by agencies and stakeholders to make sure we had as much buy-in as possible. The plan is broken. Go ahead, Kurt. So here are a couple of the kind of the major themes that your speakers have talked about. One is we don't want to lose sight of the fact that all of the recent activity, a big part of it has been linked to climate change. And so it's been real important to link the forest sector to the state's emerging issues with respect to climate. Sorry, I'm dealing with a technical thing here. Secondly, as Secretary Crawford mentioned, this is really a turning point in trying to promote regionally tailored strategies as much as possible. It's not that there isn't going to continue to be a lot of work done by Cal Fire at the Sacramento level, and certainly by Randy Moore and his staff at the regional level, but we're going to try to balance that out with increased investments and attention at the regional level. Finally, again, we're linking landscape health with wildfire preparation in communities, so we'll continue to do that. Fourth major issue is fire. We're really trying to get our hands on trying to better define high intensity fire, which is a real problem for the state, but at the same time recognizing that low intensity fire has tremendous benefits in terms of improving forest health, biodiversity, and public safety. Fifth, as Wade mentioned, a lot more attention to how the ecological health of our forests affects both public health and the economic health of our rural communities in particular. So you'll see a lot of emphasis of that in the plan. And then, of course, strong partnerships are vital at every element of the way. Okay, Curtis. Curtis, can you hear me?
Sorry, technical difficulty.
There we go, thank you. So the plan, as most of you know, is broken up into 4 sort of major sub-elements, focusing on forest health, community protection, the state's broader goals, and then innovation and progress. Next slide. On the first topic, we've got a broad sort of range of actions underway. I think first and foremost, as many of you know, the plan recommits both the state and feds to the target of treating 1 million acres annually by 2025. We're attempting to do that by scaling up across the board. You'll see strong federal commitments to scale up, state commitments to really use state land as a model to help meet that target and to focus on prescribed fire and some innovative approaches. Private land to scale up our efforts there, tribal land, and certainly through partnerships throughout the state. A big part, of course, of meeting this is going to be ramping up our use of prescribed fire. We're working with the prescribed fire work group to try to come up with a comprehensive plan this spring that builds on the task force report. So hopefully you all can look for that and be a partner in participating in that over the next couple of months. Third, I can't emphasize enough how much momentum there's been towards regional plans, regional priorities, trying to shift our emphasis towards helping local communities, whether it's a network of CWPPs in the urban areas or a network of forest collaboratives in the general forest, to try to do what we can at the state level to try to build the capacity of those regional collaboratives where we need help, and to provide funding for those regional efforts who do have their act together and have a pipeline of projects. Fourth, we're going to be spending a lot more time focusing on small landowners. There are a wide variety of programs for those owners. We had a lot of recommendations in the task force process to beef up those programs. So we're going to be working closely with CAL FIRE and other nonprofit partners to see if we can coordinate and consolidate those programs so that private landowners don't have to separately compete for half a dozen different programs, from everything to planning, to reseeding, to implementation, et cetera. The same is true on the working forest side. We've got a forest legacy program at the federal level, at the state level, and then a separate WCB program. So we're going to try to do what we can there to try to align those programs so that folks don't have to compete separately among the different agencies. First priority here, of course, is jumpstarting restoration of our worst affected burned areas. A lot of effort's going to take place this spring on both the federal side and the state side to get a handle on where those high priorities areas are and putting together funding packages to help make them work. And then finally, of course, we're continuing to spend a lot of time to echo the great work that has been done by the Board of Forestry, CAL FIRE, and the regulatory agencies to streamline planning and permitting, both through the Cal VTP planning process, which really streamlines things at the project level, and then an online platform known as CalTrees that over time is going to serve as a one-stop shop for permitting. Okay, Curtis? Second major emphasis, as you've all heard, is focus on communities. The first and big ticket item from CAL FIRE is to build out a large network of fuel breaks around vulnerable communities, but also to connect those fuel breaks with large landscape projects and collaboratives that are taking place. And then second, as Secretary Crawford said, you're going to see, and Tom, a lot of emphasis, more emphasis on a combination of home hardening programs, defensible space programs, beefing up inspections, beefing up our efforts in local communities, and supplementing those efforts with increased attention on community-wide efforts, CWPPs and other local collaborative efforts, because you folks know at the local level what your priorities and needs are better. So again, as with the general forest, we're going to try to shift our emphasis to providing sustained funding to the extent we can to local and regional collaborative efforts. And then finally, we've also got to pay attention to our roadways and evacuation routes. Caltrans, led by Lisa Worthington, has really done an amazing job of trying to map the entire state, identifying an amazing 2,600 road miles of highways in the state that are high risk. How do we coordinate treatments along those corridors with adjacent landowners? It's going to be a tough challenge, but she's committed to developing a good neighbor agreement with the Forest Service and also to partner with other private landowners to help make that happen. Next slide. And then thirdly, of course, as we talked about, while we're doing all this, we want to do this with an eye towards the state's climate and biodiversity program. So what you're going to see over the next 2 years is a rollout of several related programs. There's a natural and working lands climate smart strategy that will be completed in 2021. And then the Air Resources Board in 2022 will be updating its scoping plan. Both of those plans are increasingly recognizing the importance, as you might imagine, of the forest sector in both storing carbon and in reducing greenhouse gas emissions from fires and other forest management practices. We're also spending a lot of time working with OPR in particular. Debbie Franco has been leading quite an effort at OPR to try to pull together the state agencies to make sure they're in alignment on wood utilization strategies and co-chairing the task force that's looking at a wide variety of actions to try to jumpstart biomass and bioenergy facilities across the state. The budget's can include a climate catalyst fund to help jumpstart that effort. But a lot of progress is being made really for the first time on wood utilization to get serious about some real money and some real strategies in that sector. And then finally, I think both Wade and Randy mentioned the importance of linking this effort to outdoor recreation, particularly at a time of COVID. The governor's really committed to access for all in recreation. We want to make sure as we're moving ahead with forest health and resilience that we don't forget that our forests are a major economic driver and a major source of recreation for millions of Californians. And then finally, although it's not technically part of our forest health program, certainly urban forests are going to continue to be a very, very high priority in dealing with climate change, urban heat islands, and other impacts of climate. So we want to keep an eye on urban forests and continue to make sure that program is sustained and funded. And then finally, Curtis, our last major program is driving innovation and measuring progress. As many of you know, there's a whole new set of technology that's just being developed in the last couple of years that links forest health, fire, and climate data to better shape management decisions, to better track fires, decision support systems. So we're going to spend some time getting a better handle on those tools and coordinating state investments and energy that's devoted to those efforts. Carbon is a particular focus. We've got both CAL FIRE and ARB working very diligently with the Forest Service to try to get a better handle on carbon accounting across the board so that the forest sector can play a meaningful role in our climate change strategies. On the research strategies, I think a couple of our key focused areas are really looking very strategically at the mix of management measures that are most effective in different regions of the state, and with a special emphasis also on the health impacts of smoke as it becomes a bigger and bigger issue in the years ahead. And then finally, we're just beginning to develop out a concept of a forest data hub so that we can align the accounting and the reporting of the Forest Service, CAL FIRE, ARB, and other state and local agencies so that every year stakeholders, the legislature, others can see in one place what the feds are doing, what the state's doing, what locals are doing across the board. So you can see from this list a big emphasis on trying to update and coordinate all of our data, science, and reporting systems. So that's a general summary overall of where the plan is as a whole. Obviously, our next steps today were to, and Friday were to release the plan and budget. As I mentioned earlier, we'll also be scheduling a set of regional presentations to get more in-depth comment on the plan and our next step forward as we move ahead. So again, I appreciate all of your help in building this plan. We certainly, as Wade and Randy both said, view this as a living document. I'm sure there are holes in it. I'm sure there are things we missed. It is a framework. It doesn't mean a lot unless we're committed together to try to join forces and implement it in the most effective and efficient way as we can. And speaking of that, I'm now going to turn things over to Jessica Morse, who had the extraordinary opportunity to pull together on behalf of CAL FIRE, OPR, Cal EPA, and a wide variety of agencies, $1 billion budget. And that's, folks, what really makes this real. So I can't say enough about the work she's done, and want to turn it over to her to give you the highlights of the governor's proposed budget.
Thanks, Patrick, and congratulations on the task force report, and congratulations to the entire task force. I think this is just a really exciting collaborative vision and sets a model for the nation in terms of fire resilience that is driven by the innovation of the community and the implementers on the ground doing it. So really excited to have supported this effort, and excited for the really thoughtful results that have come out of it. And we really have a foundation for it now. That task force action plan really sets a clear roadmap based on our shared stewardship agreement with the Forest Service, and this budget is really the foundation for getting that off the ground and really making a sizable investment. As all of you know, the wildfire crisis, as you've been hearing today and have all lived through, is growing at an exponential rate. In the California fourth climate assessment, they predicted that we would see a 77% increase in acres burned annually in California by the end of this century. That prediction came through 80 years early. This year we had 4.1 million acres burned. By comparison, last year we had 277,000 acres burned, and our average annual acreage until now has been under 1 million acres. So we are seeing a dramatic increase, and it is compounding other crises we have in California, from homelessness to drought, to health crises as well, from smoke inhalation community-wide. And so really getting to the root of this is urgently needed, but it creates an exciting opportunity. And the governor's courage in putting out a $1 billion investment in wildfire mitigation and resilience really shifts us from a paradigm of suppression to a paradigm of suppression and prevention, to be able to have the tools to not only respond to the crisis, but to prevent the crisis, as you've heard from Lauren and Wade and others. And so we have taken a budget that was impacted by COVID. We were down to $75 million for wildfire, forest health and wildfire prevention. And now we are looking at $1 billion. So going from 75 million to $1 billion gives us a huge paradigm shift in the tools and our capacity to scale up to meet the scale of the crisis. Now, this is a crisis that is born out of multiple generations of policy decisions. And so it's going to take, we need to make a multi-generational scale investment to make that, to really unwind this crisis. And $1 billion investment gets us there. So it gets us to that foundation. And our goal with this is to not have it just be a flash in the pan, but to really make it a foundational investment that we can build a multi-generational solution on top of. And that generations from now can look back and see the impact of this collaborative effort and of these decisions that are actually going to have not only protection for now, but for the next century. So what we are looking at is investing across the three fronts of wildfire resilience that you've heard about from Patrick and Wade and Tom and Randy today, where we are looking at ensuring that we have an entire landscape that is healthy and wildfire resilient, where we are returning the ecological role of fire to the right ecology, that they're having the right intensity of burns, that they are thin enough that if there's a fire that breaks out, it's not devastating. It doesn't get out of control. It doesn't look like the Creek fire with a pyrocumulonimbus cloud, you know, shooting down hurricane force winds in every direction. And so we want to make sure that we're getting to a point where we have resilient forests and watershed that are back to their normal adaptation for the fire adapted ecologies, and that we've removed the fire from the landscape where they are not fire adapted ecologies and allow them the time and space like chaparral ecosystems to recover. So we're investing in landscapes. We're investing in strategic fuel breaks where firefighters can take a stand and communities can escape an oncoming fire. And we're investing in home hardening and community resilience. In the worst case scenario, a fire comes through, those homes have a better chance of surviving. And these investments also are going to be delivering reliable green jobs and businesses. They are actually going to not only deliver us climate resilience, but also help get us a more robust economy and opportunity for some of the most vulnerable Californian economies. And finally, this is also a sizable investment towards the governor's commitment towards 30 by 30. Ensuring that we are conserving 30% of our land doesn't just mean setting it aside in terms of ownership. It means, or how it's managed. It means actively managing it so that it's protected. If we lose our protected lands to catastrophic fire, then we have failed in our efforts to conserve them. And so this active management and active restoration to ensure that what we are restoring is a healthy, robust ecology is really crucial, and this investment gets us there. So the $1 billion is really divided among those three fronts and also addresses those foundational investments in workforce and business development and science and technology. So one of the largest investments here is over $500 million on the landscape/watershed resilience front, ensuring that we have a cohesive approach across an entire watershed and across the ownerships in that watershed. So this means a really direct investment across state, local, and creating the opportunities for federal partnerships. So this is continuing and increasing our grant funding for forest health and climate resilience that many of you have benefited from. There is direct funding for tribes in here to ensure that we are protecting and promoting tribal assets and also promoting and understanding traditional ecological knowledge in our wildfire approach. There is over $200 million in funding for state partners to ensure that our state landowners have the resources they need, like state parks and Fish and Wildlife and State Lands Commission, Tahoe Conservancy, that they have the resources they need to be able to actively protect and manage some of the most incredible landscapes and precious ecosystems in California. And it also includes support for private land management, $50 million for the California Forest Improvement Program to help support small landowners in ensuring that their small forest lands have the tools to be actively managed and that they don't have to face the decision between managing for wildfire or selling that land, which could convert to housing in fire vulnerable communities. And finally, this landscape investment really is going to start focusing on making sure that we're investing in regions that have project pipelines ready to go. And so one of the first ones is the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, which has an entire watershed improvement program with over 100 projects already identified, ready to go. And so we will try to make a cohesive investment there to be able to then deliver cohesive results. And this really gets us down to this regional concept, because one of the points we have been hearing from many of our partners is thank you for the grants. We are delighted to have grant funding. However, we sometimes have to wait 3 years between getting one part of a fuel break or forest health project done until we can fund the next section. or we can't get our grant funding until we've done the regional planning or the project preparation, like the ecological analysis. And so ensuring that regions that are fire prone and vulnerable have the resources up front to be able to do the project and regional planning and the project development, including the project preparation, such as your CEQA analysis, will help ensure that we have a more steady flow of what we're calling shovel-ready projects and of regional pipelines ready to go, so that you can actually get your projects done all at once, and then we can fund them as a region. We're still going to continue grant programs, but the goal of an investment that we're making in the Regional Forest and Fire Capacity Program through the Department of Conservation is to ensure that all regions have those forward planning and preparation tools to be able to then faster execute projects. I don't want to hear these heart-wrenching stories of a community that had a project identified but didn't have its CEQA analysis done or didn't fit in with a broader regional plan. And so these are tools that are going to help get there, and then we can follow in with grant dollars to ensure that we're making a more cohesive investment in a region, so that you don't have one side of a watershed burning catastrophically while you have patches that burned at a healthy ecological level when there's a fire, because instead you'll have the entire area or entire community protected. So really making those regional investments are going to be crucial to ensuring that we have a steady investment in forest health. We're also making investments in the strategic fuel breaks. We're continuing CAL FIRE's ramping up their efforts, that they're following on that 35 emergency projects they did in record time last year that saved lives in this fire season. They are doubling down on those efforts. We expect CAL FIRE to hit their commitment from the Forest Carbon Plan of 60,000 acres a year coming up here. So it is really exciting to see them be able to have the resources and tools and workforce available, including partnerships with the California Conservation Corps, to be able to get those protective fuel breaks done. We'll also continue our fire prevention grants program so that communities can have a sense of autonomy and direct how those dollars are spent. And then the last real level on those three fronts of investing in the landscape, in the strategic fuel breaks, is that community hardening piece. And we have funding identified for $25 million for home hardening. We are planning to work with FEMA to try to get 3-to-1 matching to make that a $100 million pilot program, to be able to bring in community volunteers, the Fire Safe Council, potentially Habitat for Humanity, to develop partnerships to be able to deliver support in addition to education for homeowners that can't afford to make the simple retrofits that help harden their homes. And so we'll also be investing in defensible space inspectors and land use planners through the state fire marshal to ensure that there is that level of expertise to support communities in ensuring that they are developing their plans and executing their public safety in a way that is actually going to deliver the wildfire resilience that they so need. Then finally, we're really working on expanding economic opportunity, that this foundational investment, investing in all of these new projects that are going to be coming out, investing in programs, will put a lot of dollars on the landscape and develop for communities. But one of the challenges we have been hearing from both state entities, our federal partners, and local partners is that it's hard to find people to hire. It's hard to find small businesses that have masticators or thinning equipment. It's hard to hire trained hand crews or trained prescribed fire crews to get out there. And so we're making a sizable investment of $76 million in really trying to jumpstart and catalyze the economy in this sector. $24 million for workforce development and $74 million for $47 million for the Climate Catalyst Fund. The Climate Catalyst Fund would be low interest loans to anybody wanting to do that work with a solid business plan in that forest sector. We've been hearing that people who want to start up businesses and get a loan for a masticator or a cross-laminated timber operation or a micro mill in their backyard, any of these scales, are looking at sometimes 40% interest rates or no interest at all from the bank, or no opportunities at all, because rural banks have gone away. And so through iBank and this Climate Catalyst Fund, we are investing in this to ensure that there are business opportunities and that small businesses can start up to actually utilize the woody biomass and wood coming out of the forest so that carbon gets sequestered rather than open pile burned or rotting in the forest. And so ensuring that we have business opportunities that also enhance our carbon goals is really crucial and exciting aspect of this budget proposal. And that workforce development piece is also really exciting because it will develop a robust workforce partnerships with community colleges or programs like the CHIPS program that partner with tribes and employ and train members of Sierra tribes in ensuring that they can actually be the forest management crews and incorporate that traditional ecological knowledge into our land management practices. So there's really exciting models on the ground that we'll be investing in and continuing to invest in and growing to ensure that there is a robust workforce to be able to hire, to be able to execute all of these programs on the ground and invest in them in a way that is actually reinvesting and keeping those dollars and resources in our communities that need the most support. And then the last piece on this is really science-based management. We want to make sure that we are doing this in a way that is adaptive management. We know that science and knowledge is changing all the time, as well as our climate is changing. And the assumptions we had 3 years ago may not hold today because of the new dynamics of changing temperature and weather patterns. And so we are investing in both spatial analytics acquisition, ground data investments, research projects to make sure that we are incorporating the latest science into our techniques, standards, and oversight for the ecological consistency. So I'm excited to roll out this budget. I'm so grateful for all of the investments and work that all of you have done, and excited to work with you in advocating for this with the legislature, because this is really an investment that is going to not only create a foundation for this strategic path, it creates wildfire safety for our communities and our ecology now, and it will have an enduring impact and be something we can build on for generations to come to ensure that we get it right. So thank you so much, and really excited to partner with all of you, and thank you for all of your insights and innovation and commitment to a climate healthy California.
All right, thank you very much, Jessica. I think with that, we're going to wrap up. I appreciate everybody joining us today. As I mentioned at the outset, we are going to be scheduling a series of meetings with our regional groups to answer your questions in more detail. And to follow through. I've been discussing already with Secretary Crawford, with Randy Moore and others, the appropriate structure of the task force. We do plan to scale it back somewhat. And this time with a focus on results and accountability. As Wade kept mentioning, we'll be pulling together teams of the agencies that are responsible for the actions and developing a structure that's really focused on producing results over the next couple of years. So thank you again for joining us. And as always, feel free to contact me directly as well. Thank you again.